Okay, everybody. So today we're going to have a look at Outdoor Survival, a game about wilderness skills. I think if anybody has watched already, I did mention that there are two great Board Game Geek users that have put out videos for this game on the BGG page for Outdoor Survival, Callendale and Hello Gregor. And as I recommended again, I'm going to just state it all over again that I highly recommend those two videos. Callendale's disgust at the whole game is very entertaining to some degree. He does make a couple of mistakes, I believe, which I will correct here. There's not that many. For the most part, he does it justice. One part of it, though, that I think is kind of one of his biggest pet peeves about the game I do want to talk about because he was doing that wrong for some of the scenarios. And then Hello Gregor's poetic, prose-filled piece on the game is just a pleasure to watch. So I got this in a math trade recently. There's a scan of the board. It's a hard-mounted board there. And I've been interested in this one for quite a while. It's been on my wish list on BGG for quite a while. So I'm really glad to finally have a copy of it in the collection. And I've played it. I played kind of three of the, what is it, five scenarios? Yes, I've played three of the five scenarios. And we'll kind of go through them scenario by scenario, and I'll just kind of talk about it, and then maybe I'll play a little bit of one of the scenarios to show you more of an instructional. So the first thing to notice about this board is there's these little kind of cabins all over the board here, and they represent various spots that you can start during the game. There's also one on each edge of the northeast, east, south, and west edges of the board. They're all numbered, different scenarios have you start in different cabins. Then you'll notice there's, here, let's get one that's a bit closer. There we go. So there's a deer there. Hopefully that's still kind of in focus. And you can see a little body of water there, bodies of water there, another deer there. Sometimes they are combined into one space. Let's see if we can find one close to us. Here we go, right there. And those represent where you're going to be able to collect food and water. Through some of the terrains, there's a little path. A lot of the times they kind of go in a straight line. One like this, for example, kind of weaves through. Those are very important when it comes to movement, because if you enter a path, even if you're supposed to go straight, according to the die rolls for the random direction, you can use that path as a straight line. It cuts down on the terrain cost. So it just costs 1 to go on the path as opposed to the regular 2 for when you're in the woods. There's these that are called fords. I thought it was pronounced fjord, but it's spelled F-O-R-D-S. And it's basically a pathway through the lake, doing the same thing, negating the cost of 3 movement points across the rivers here if you go across the ford. It just costs the 1 movement point again. There's paths through mountains there, paths through the swamplands as well. What else should you know about this? Clear terrains, just regular hexes, are 1 movement point. Woods, as I said, were 2. Desert is 2 as well. Mountains, it costs you 3 movement points. Lakes, it costs you 3 movement points. And swamp, it costs you 4. And that's, as with a lot of games of this style, if there's 2 combined into 1, so here we still have a bit of a river combined with the swamp, you would take the higher, so it would still cost you 4 movement points to enter that hex. Yeah, so that's that. There is a basically the ultimate goal of each of the scenarios is to not die, and that's tracked by the water and food index that you see at the top of the this little player aid or chart here. At the end for like, maybe we should actually talk about that when we get into the scenarios. So you track your life levels with water and food index, and then your life levels also tracked by this series of chits. I'm sorry if that really does look out of focus. I'm sorry about that. Um, there's a look at the life level track. So each of the chits has a movement allowance on it. You start out the game with the A, and A is worth 6 movement points. Every time your life level goes across one of these divides, your life level index drops accordingly. So you can see these early ones, it's 1, this one 2, 4, 7, etc., which then leads you down this track where you go from 6 movement points to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 till finally you're at 0. Once you've hit the letter O and you have to drop another life level, you're dead, and that's the end of your game. Maybe at this point I will pause and we will I'll get a little closer with the focus on the camera and we can get a better look at some of the chits and some of the scenarios and that sort of thing. So I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are back, and there's a little closer look now that I've refocused the camera. It's the one downside of this little Canon. The focus doesn't automatically adjust for me. I always have to set it before I start recording a video. It's kind of a bothersome bit. So let's have a look at scenario 1. And I think I had read on Board Game Geek, someone was talking about this game, and they said it, and I completely agree with them. This is the scenario that chases a lot of people off of this game. It's a horrible scenario. Out of the 3 that I've played, by far, this was my least favorite. The idea of the game in general is to kind of give you an idea of what it's like surviving in the wilderness and how dependent you are on food and water, as if people didn't know that. The biggest problem with this one is the randomness of wandering, which, again, I understand it's supposed to simulate being lost in the woods. Sometimes you end up walking in circles, that sort of thing. But it does not make for a very fun scenario. Thankfully, there's 4 more that are a lot more fun, the ones that I've played anyway. So let's have a look at the scenario cards bit by bit. So at the top, you get what the scenario is. You get your objectives, which in this case is get out of the wilderness, which means off the board, before thirst and starvation render you not survived. You start at base number, you start at base number 5 up here, and you just have to get off the board either direction. And then obviously to win, first player to move off any side of the map board wins. Players rendered not survived before moving off the map board must drop out of the game. You can do an alternate, which is move off the east side only. So at the top of every scenario card, you get that little bit of description. On the side here, you get your necessities. Food, you satisfy current day's needs only if you end movement on a food hex. Moving through a food hex does not satisfy your needs. Water, you satisfy current day's needs only if you end movement on a catch basin or stream hex. Moving through such hexes does not satisfy your needs. Now, this is an important thing to talk about. This is the rule that really set Callendale off, and I completely agree with them. It's absolutely ridiculous to assume that if you were lost in the woods and at one point you were thirsty, that during your movement through the woods you wouldn't stop and have a drink before moving on. So the idea that this person lost would not collect any water or doesn't have the ability to collect water as they're going or drink water as they're going is completely ridiculous, that you have to end your movement on a food or water source in order to actually drink or eat, is completely strange. Now, where the issue for him was that, but where his mistake was that in each of the scenarios, the necessities are different, and that rule only applies to the lost scenario. For the rest of the scenarios, during your movement, if you cross food or water, you meet your day's needs. You do not have to end your movement in those hexes. So that's very, very important to keep in mind, because that can really make or break a game. If that was the rule all throughout, it would be shit. It would just be nonsense. But that is not the case. So keeping that in mind, that for this scenario, that's what you have to do. Along those same lines, in the rules, they also do say if you want to kind of change the difficulty, you can state at the beginning of the game that each of these huts or each of these bases contain water and some sort of food, so you can count those as a water and food source as well. And that's how I was playing the game. It came more into play. I don't know if it actually came into play too much in my scenarios. I mean, I did use it for sure, but for the most part, I was always, when I could, and you'll see why in a moment, when I could, I was shooting for a food and water source, or at least making my movement on the later scenarios, getting a path through those spots so I could collect along the way. So movement brings us to this section of our player aid. This is the direction ability. Each of them are different. It'll give you what your die roll. You roll a die, and whatever it is, you read that section. So first, what happens if you roll a 1? You consult the random direction chart printed on the board, which is right there. Then roll the die again. You then must move in the direction indicated by the arrow on the random direction chart. Move in straight line only. No turns permitted. As far as possible, subject to current movement allowances and terrain restrictions. So that's where the extreme randomness comes into play. Number 2 and 3, consult random direction chart printed on the board, then roll the die again. You must start in the direction indicated by the arrow on the random direction chart. After moving 1 or more hexes, you may make 1 direction change if desirable. So if you roll a 1, you're limited to whatever direction you roll on the random direction table there. And you have to always move the maximum. In this particular scenario, you have to move the maximum of your chit. So in this instance, you have to move 6 unless you can't due to terrain. A 2 and a 3, you start your direction in that random direction chart, and then you can make 1 turn if you want to another direction. And we'll see that sort of thing come into play later. 4, 5, and 6 in this one is start in any direction, but you must move in a straight line only. No direction change permitted as far as possible. So, and those are good ones because then you can kind of choose whichever direction you want to go, but you still have to move all your spaces, and then you have to move in a straight line. And that's where spaces like the beginning of paths really help you out. If you are here, even though this curve is not a straight line, in the rules, they say if you're on a path, you can consider that a straight line, even if it does curve. So you'd be able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which would end you on a water, more important than getting food for your dropping of life level indexes. So I think you can probably see why this particular scenario maybe isn't the most fun. You end up a lot, or I did anyway on my scenario, just kind of randomly wandering around. And then when you do roll a 4, 5, or a 6 and you kind of gain some momentum towards a direction, the next turn you'll roll a 1 or a 2 or a 3, and then you'll be sent off the opposite direction. Or what was happening to me early on is I would start my way out and I would literally just keep coming back for a few turns. I just kept coming back and then losing more water, losing more food. Out of the 3 scenarios that I did play, this one lasted the shortest amount of time. I died really quickly. And like I said, it just wasn't that much fun. And I think it's mainly because of you're at the mercy of the die rolls. And again, I understand that that's what this is supposed to mimic. It's supposed to mimic being lost in the woods, but being lost in the woods is not fun at the best of times, let alone recreating it on a game board. So that's a look at that one. And then on the flip side of these, we'll talk about this quickly as well too. You have a wilderness encounter table. Your turn goes in kind of phases. First thing you do is you roll on the direction ability chart and do your movements. Then when your movement is over, you see if you've landed on a food or water supply, and then adjust your indexes accordingly. And then the final thing you do before it's the next player's turn is you roll on the wilderness encounter table. So there's a variety of ways that you can do this. They suggest rolling a die to see which column you're going to be looking at, and then rolling again to see which section or which space you're going to be reading. And this does a lot of things. You can see in this one, personal is gain 1 step of food index, gain 1 step of water, remain stationary, lose 2 steps, lose 1 step, lose 2 life levels. There's something that's going to happen to you in every single one, and most of them risky. I was kind of just going in order, starting on natural, next time animal, next time personal, just so I could get a sense of every single one. That's how I kind of sort of randomized it. This actually brings up a good point as well too. You can, just slide that over there, you can increase your water and food indexes. How you do that, it doesn't specify on this in the necessities like it does in the other ones, but in various scenarios you can stay a few turns on a food or a water or a food and water hex and increase your water index and your food index. They can never go further left than the start here section, but if you are down and you make those jumps back up, when you cross that life level back when you're moving left, you also gain those moving left again. So you can kind of heal yourself, so to speak. You can kind of hang out and just get a little bit more energy to continue on your quest or on your escape or rescue mission. So that's that scenario. Let's look at, we'll kind of briefly look at these other ones. I won't go into as much detail. Survival was a fun one. It's just moving across the board, basically. They get you to start on base number 9, and you just have to find your way across the other side of the board, the west side of the board. The first player there wins the scenario. Throughout the scenarios, they change this direction ability chart. This one is a 1, 2, 3, 4 is that, 5, 6 is that. Same kind of things though, consulting the random direction chart, then rolling the dice. After removing 1 or more hexes, you may make 1 direction change. Start in any direction, but you must move in a straight line only. Start in any direction. After moving 1 or more hexes, you may make 1 direction change if desirable. So that's the difference in there, allowing you to make the change. And again, just to stress this, that the necessities table here on each of these scenarios is very important to read because every scenario has a different necessity. So this one is you satisfy current day's needs if you pass through or end movement on a food hex. You may also recover 3 steps on the food index by remaining stationary for the following 3 turns on a food hex. And then water is you satisfy current day's needs if you pass through or end movement on a catch basin or stream hex. You may also recover 1 step in the water index by remaining stationary for the following 3 turns on a water hex. So those are very important things to remember. When you are staying stationary, you just don't roll for movement, but you still roll, if you're using it, you still roll on your wilderness encounter table at the end of every one of those turns as you're keeping track. At the end of the 3 turns, move your indexes, gain your life levels if applicable, and then on your next turn you can move again, or you can wait again. You can sit around for 6 turns if you want. But every time that you're sitting around, you're exposed to something happening to you on this wilderness encounter table, which could be remain stationary for 2 turns or lose 2 steps on your water index, a variety of things. So that's survival. And scenario 3 is search. It's locating a lost person. All person counters at either base 7 or 9 at the individual player's choice. Take 1 missing counter of any color plus 6 blank counters and place them upside down in separate locations randomly on the middle board. So with each of the colored chits, you get 5 blanks. There's also a chit that's missing party. So if you're playing 2 players or 3 players, you just choose whichever color is not being played. Take the blank chits and the missing person chits, and then just figure out some way. I just kind of mixed them and placed them all over here, just kind of shuffled them around so I didn't know. And you just place them anywhere in this middle board. 1 player starts on this side, 1 player starts on that side. And you go to these chits. When you land on the same hex, and you turn it over to reveal the missing person, that's the end of the game. You don't have to take them off the board. In scenario 4 is the rescue scenario. In rescue, you not only have to locate the missing person, you do have to accompany them across the board. You have to help them escape. So, and then the other difference is this: start all person counters at either base number 7 or 9 at player's choice. Place as many missing counters as there are players, plus 6 blank counters upside down randomly anywhere on the middle board. So that's the difference there. If you're playing 2 players, there's going to be 2 missing person chits plus 6 blanks. So there's still that hit and miss kind of element where you think you found them, but you haven't, that sort of thing. I didn't play the rescue one, but I did play the search, and I really liked it. I thought it was, out of the 3 that I did play, it was my favorite, followed closely by survival. I liked the race across the board. And honestly, I found it a lot more fun with this necessities, but also using these bases as a food and a water supply, especially on the survival racing across the board. It just gave me more options in the middle, and it sort of made sense to me in my head as far as if I'm finding a base, chances are I'm going to find some sort of water supply or some sort of food source. So those ones were fun. I think those ones were really great. And then the last one we have is the pursue scenario. And this is, the objective is, as an escaped prisoner, get out of the wilderness to safety. As the pursuer, recapture the escapee before he gets off the board. So 1 player plays the escapee. 2nd player is the pursuer, the guard. They tell you to start at different spots. You have to catch them, basically. And again, the necessities for this are, as with the other ones, are if you pass through a food or water hex, consider yourself meeting those needs for that particular turn. There's different direction abilities for the pursuer and the pursued here. And yeah, I mean, that's basically all the scenarios. What else can I tell you about it? It comes with 4 different colors. I have 1 chit missing from here. The H is missing from our life level index. Not the end of the world. You can always leave that blank. It's really not that big of a deal, or use one of the blanks and write on it. The rules are really easy to follow. It's not a complex game by any stretch. It's I don't know. Like I said, I really like it. I thought it was a lot of fun. The scenarios were great. I can't wait to play the next couple of scenarios. It's actually a game that I think my wife and son will like as well. So I'm anxious to get them sitting down to play this. The sense of imagination with this, and making your way through the wilderness and trying to find a good path and that sort of thing, I think is interesting. There's a lot of good mental stimulation there as far as visuals as you're playing. You can make up your own little stories and things. One of the things that a lot of people end up saying about this is that it can be used to kind of create your own scenarios and write up your own scenario cards and that sort of thing. So you can have this map board represent whatever you want, incorporate it into other games even. I haven't read it yet, but I think that there was someone had wrote an article about combining this game with Yellowstone as well, which is the previous video that I did. I haven't read it yet, so I'm curious what that says, how those would incorporate together. So I'll probably end up splitting this video into a two-parter. I'll be back and we will do one of the gameplays. Maybe I'll show you the search scenario. I'll set it up and we'll come back and I'll show you a few turns and just give you a sense of how the game can play. I'll just play a one player, more for the idea of just giving you a look at the game and how it plays. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.